Inside the Hastinapura palace, King Dhritarashtra is pacing through the dark. He is paralyzed by a state of profound psychological distress. The emissary Sanjaya has just delivered a scathing public rebuke of the king's conduct. By withholding the specific terms of the Pandavas' demands until morning, he has forced Dhritarashtra to confront his own moral vacuum in the isolation of the night. This severe insomnia serves as a somatic manifestation of a dharma. It is the physical weight of unrighteousness and the anxiety of imminent dynastic collapse. This crisis is documented in the Udyoga Parva, which records the frantic diplomatic maneuvers preceding the Kurukshetra war. Embedded within these chapters is a high-stakes psychological intervention that takes place in the dead of night. The king's physical sleeplessness mirrors the collapse of his political legitimacy and his inability to govern his own mind. To find a psychological anesthetic for his distress, Dhritarashtra summons his half-brother and chief minister, Vidura. Vidura is the human incarnation of Yama, the deity of righteousness and cosmic justice. His birth status as a Dasiputra bars him from the throne, positioning him as an objective, detached observer within the Kuru court. Upon arriving, Vidura offers no comforting platitudes. He diagnoses the king's condition as the direct result of his complicity in theft. Vidura presents an uncompromising thesis. A leader's fate is dictated by the psychological contagion of their inner circle. The Vidura Nīti, comprising chapters 33 through 40 of the Udyoga Parva, presents a technical framework for leadership, trust, and association. Vidura begins with the microdynamics of interpersonal association, establishing a law of character permeability. He illustrates that human character is actively contagious. Just as a cloth absorbs the influence of the dye it is soaked in, an individual takes on the traits of those they serve or live with. The text provides a rigorous categorization of this psychological infection, showing how proximity to wickedness overwrites a leader's moral architecture. Specifically, it outlines the markers of the murkha, the fool, and the toxic companion. The first symptom of a toxic associate is an unsteady, vacillating mind. A person who does not serve the experienced or the wise is fundamentally incapable of forming stable, reliable friendships. The second symptom is a lack of emotional calibration. The text warns against those who give way to anger or are gratified without sufficient cause. This lack of regulation is a critical liability in statecraft. It introduces volatility into the king's decision-making process. This is contrasted with the wise person, who maintains purposeful action and equanimity, regardless of external pleasure, pain, profit, or loss. Admitting an emotionally unregulated person into an inner circle ensures the leader's own psychological destabilization. Scaling to the mesodynamics of statecraft, Vidura challenges the assumption that absolute trust is an inherent moral virtue. This syntax tree diagrams Udyoga Parva 38.9, a verse detailing the specific calculation of risk in strategic relationships. The first rule is na vishvased avishvaste. One must never trust the untrustworthy. The second rule is more complex. Vishvaste nati vishvased. One should not put too much trust even in those who should be trusted. The verse explains the consequence. Vishvasad bhayam utpanam. Danger is born directly from the act of reposing trust. This misplaced trust eventually, mulani api nikrintati. It cuts down the very roots of the kingdom's security. This root cutter mechanism identifies an internal betrayal as an existential threat. While external enemies strike at the branches, an over-trusted internal ally can destroy the state's foundation. Classical commentators describe this as the rigorous application of prudence. It is the currency of stable governance. A king's survival depends on his capacity to verify. To survive is the prerequisite for governing justly. In this framework of realpolitik, unchecked trust is a self-inflicted threat to sovereignty. At the macro level, Vidura analyzes the systemic failure of the Kuru court's advisory council. The court has become an ecosystem of confirmation bias, engineered by sycophants who mirror the king's own attachments. Vidura compares the lethality of bad counsel to physical poison. He notes that while poison or a weapon kills only one person, wicked advice can destroy an entire kingdom, including the subjects. This creates a terminal strategic vulnerability. Advisors who speak pleasingly are abundant, while those willing to speak and listen to unpleasant but beneficial truths are exceedingly rare. This demand for truth-telling is rooted in classical laws regarding noble speech. It must be truthful, pleasing, and consistent with Dharma. A noble family is defined by this moral conduct and virtue, not by accumulated wealth or land. A leader who isolates themselves from unpleasant truths is acting on bad data, making catastrophic miscalculations in times of crisis inevitable. Back in the Hastinapura court, Dhritarashtra admits the validity of Vidura's words, but claims he is a puppet of destiny, unable to act against his son's desires. Vidura warns the king that association creates shared liability. Just as wet fuel burns when placed with dry fuel, a sinless man is punished equally with the sinful if he maintains constant association with them.
Dhritarashtra's failure followed a mechanical logic of associative filtering rather than the inscrutable forces of destiny. The cost of ignoring this logic was the annihilation of the Kuru dynasty and over 1.6 million combatants. The mechanics of this collapse are observable in the failure of modern institutions. Vidura's warnings on sycophancy identify the same root causes of what modern sociology calls groupthink, the insulation of a leader from corrective data through a circle of agreeable subordinates who prefer confirmation over truth. When modern organizations fail to create the safety required for employees to speak truth to power, they fall into the same blind spots that destroyed the Kuru state. The Vidura Nīti demonstrates that leadership is a derivative of self-rule. A leader who trusts without verification, lacks self-restraint, and prioritizes the comfort of flattery is already conquered.